help me in welcoming Roger.
Good afternoon. I'm pleased to be representing the Climate Action and Energy Innovation Division. That's a division of the Manitoba Environment and Climate Change Department with the Government of Manitoba. And I'm here to talk to you today about Manitoba's evolving approach in integrating climate change considerations into the environmental approvals process under Manitoba's Environment Act. And this presentation will be less focused on regulation for regulation's sake and more on practical risk management, resilience, and long-term asset performance under conditions of a variable climate. There we go. Okay, today I'm going to talk about climate resilience and why it matters in the environmental approval process in Manitoba. I'm going to point to specific Environment Act licensing language in the Act to show you where climate fits. Sometimes people say, where is it? And it's kind of in the fine print. We'll also talk about the alignment of provincial climate sustainability priorities. These were announced in our Path to Net Zero strategy by the Premier in October of 25. And a lot of the objectives announced in that guide us into action. We're going to talk about some of the current environmental assessment gaps we see when people don't integrate climate integration or climate considerations in their environmental assessment, kind of demonstrating the need for new guidance. And we'll talk about the new guidance that we're developing now in greenhouse gas estimation and also in climate resilience. And I'll finish by talking about the benefits for proponents and Manitobans when we do all this. And I just want to mention my goal today is not to suggest that every project suddenly needs an exhaustive climate study. Rather, I'm here to explain why climate-informed planning is increasingly part of good engineering, good asset management, and good governance. Okay, today we know that climate resilience, the ability to cope, respond, and keep operating under climate impacts is no longer a future consideration. We need to pay attention to climate impacts now. We see impacts all around us. Every season is becoming impact season. So climate change is already affecting our infrastructure performance, our life cycles, our operations, our reliability, public safety, and costs over the entire life cycle. And environmental approvals represent one of the earliest opportunities in a project's life cycle where climate-related risks can be identified and managed before the consequences emerge. So in Manitoba, we now experience more frequent and more severe extreme weather conditions driving those impacts. Our annual disaster costs provincially now amount to hundreds of millions of dollars, and climate change is accelerating that trend. And that means that damages to assets in infrastructure, housing, and agriculture translate into very costly impacts at the direct and indirect at the health, community, and business sector levels. For asset managers, the key question becomes, will this asset function effectively under future climate conditions during its intended service life? So when you place a development in a location at a site and it's sitting there exposed to future climate for decades to come, the question is, can it handle those changes? That's the core resilience question we face. Often when we talk about weaving into climate resilience into project development, we hear about how this could be an additional cost burden. And it is important to recognize that integrating climate resilience investments are highly cost effective. And so the least expensive time to integrate those investments and integrate resilience itself is during the planning and design of a project, not after impacts and failure. And the World Resources Institute has recently reported that for every dollar that you spend or invest in resilience measures, you get over $10 in benefit back. And the Canadian Climate Institute, in its Prepare or Repair report released and updated in late April, they indicate that when those benefits are properly economically valued, the return on investment is even more powerful. So resilience means more than just damage avoidance and cost avoidance. We actually get 3 resilience benefits that are also beneficial to our communities. We get a resilience benefit from health and safety. We get a resilience benefit from health and safety. We get one from I'm having a difficult time reading my slides here. And climate mitigation also comes with energy efficiencies as well. I'd like to focus on where climate considerations fit in Manitoba's Environment Act licensing process. Often there's an assumption that climate resilience is somehow external to environmental assessment, but in practice, climate-related hazards directly impact environmental effects, project performance, and public safety. And because of this, this creates a natural linkage between climate resilience and environmental approvals. When we look at the Act already provides authority to consider climate risks. The legislation focuses on projects that may have significant effects, and climate-driven hazards such as flooding, extreme heat, extreme precipitation, and extreme winds are foreseeable events. They're environmental conditions that can be foreseen and appropriately managed. The Act also carries future-oriented language, and that language matters too because it refers to protection of the environment for current and future generations. So that supports consideration of how evolving climate may influence environmental effects over a project's lifespan. And then lastly, the director, she has the ability and the discretion to ask for information, additional information on every project. So we know that climate change alters baseline environmental conditions, and this means the future operating environment may differ significantly from historical conditions. And reliance on historical climate alone always leaves unaddressed risk on the table. And for engineers, from their perspective and a risk management angle, climate change effectively changes the context of the design. And it has to because climate change is operating environment change. And so this is why forward thinking is critically important in our development of projects. And we know that the current EAP guidelines already reference climate change implications in greenhouse gas inventories. However, guidance has been limited on the resilience part of this. And so proponents need a guidance to practically integrate climate considerations into planning and design for their projects. And Manitoba's new Path to Net Zero strategy also increases our focus on integrating climate change considerations across all decisions for government. And work is underway now to build that supporting guidance to help proponents put this in place. The objective with the guidance is improved clarity, consistency, and practicality. And this brings us to the policy side of our discussion. Enhancing climate considerations and environmental approvals aligns closely with Manitoba's broader climate and sustainability goals. Manitoba's Path to Net Zero strategy stresses government leadership in climate change, strengthening climate governance, and integrating climate change decisions into decision-making. Environmental assessment is one important place where those broader policy considerations and directions intersect with real-world infrastructure and development decisions, including climate resilience and greenhouse gas management. And at its core, resilience planning asks that key question: will the development cope with the anticipated changes it's going to be exposed to across its service life? And that question is extremely important, whether you're dealing with transportation infrastructure, municipal systems, industrial developments, institutional buildings, or community assets. Increasingly, resilience is becoming part of a prudent, long-term asset stewardship approach. I want to take some time to just talk about a few of the gaps we often see reoccurring in EAs for climate integration. We often see reasons for not considering climate, such as we follow current codes, we used historical data, we added a safety factor, we discussed climate qualitatively, or the uncertainty is a little bit too gnarly for us to attack this. Some of those can be okay starting points, but they're not approaches on their own. Following current codes doesn't always work because not all current codes have climate integration into them. That's a huge effort. It's being worked on constantly. Codes, standards committees are all over the place doing hard work and integrating climate change considerations into those codes. But it'll be a long time before that's all done. In the meantime, best practice requires us to review the adequacy of the design, look at those future climate change conditions, and design beyond code as appropriate. And using historical data is folly because we know now that past climate does not equal historical climate, or pardon me, it does not equal the future climate, so forward-looking projections are the best practice there. And 20 years ago, even 15 years ago, it was really difficult to get climate projections in Manitoba. And if you could get them, you had to pay $40,000 for the data set. Now we have the ClimateWest serving the 3 provinces in the prairies. We have the Prairie Climate Center in Winnipeg, the University of Winnipeg, These resources are very helpful in getting you up to speed with the climate profiles currently and where the trends are going for your communities. Also, discussing climate qualitatively, there is nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's probably one of the most valuable things you can do when it comes to climate risk assessment. Just imagine having a table and around a workshop with multidisciplinary professionals, people who have a different perspective from health, from the community, from all sorts of angles. And when they can chime in on different risks and what those risks mean as the impacts flow through a community, you can gain some huge insights there that are really helpful in making your project more resilient. The key thing, though, is they have to be documented, these conversations. If they're not documented, they almost didn't happen, and there's no way to actually leverage those insights into decisions that make the project more resilient. And when uncertainty is you're facing uncertainty, engineers deal with uncertainty on a routine basis. So we never let uncertainty stop us from making prudent, proactive, precautionary decisions. Another issue that we see is when future climate projections are integrated in an assessment, they're sometimes referenced only at a high level, and they're not meaningfully connected to any specific project components. And so, for example, questions like, will extreme temperatures affect the material properties of a critical process in the project? Or how will wildfire or drought affect your operations? Those questions remain unanswered in the submission. And so the linkage between projected climate conditions and actual infrastructure vulnerabilities are often missing. I spent some time talking about the resilience side of climate integration. I want to spend a quick moment on greenhouse gas emissions and considerations involving GHGs. In many submissions, GHG emissions are often treated as unavoidable project characteristics. And standard construction site practices like just maintaining your equipment properly have been advanced as GHG management strategies when really they're just a start. These measures have value, but there is a need to move towards measurable, transparent, and more specifically, most importantly, project level remediation. We're looking forward to leveraging those. Similarly, on the greenhouse gas side, there are also benefits that come with improved GHG management approaches. We can reduce life cycle costs, we can improve efficiencies on projects, and this supports Manitoba's transition to a resilient low-carbon economy, which is a key point of our net zero strategy. Many low-carbon measures also create operational efficiencies over time. EVs, for example, carry lower fuel costs, especially these days, and lower maintenance costs. And so we're moving forward on this path